So I suppose what I want to talk to you today about is we work in a blended learning context. Your panicology is our norm. So what we have done really is we have tried to create structures that encourage student engagement. For us, in a blended context, engagement is about, I suppose, inviting students into a learning community. And that, for the most part, exists in a virtual space. Um, and we invite them into that community in three ways. So we have our induction process, which is like a one-to-one process. If we can go on to the next slide, is that okay? Yeah, thank you. So our induction, that's one-to-one. When students come to us first and they meet with their studies advisor, we go through any barriers that may exist in terms of computer literacy. They're taken through our online virtual learning environment. We have over the years developed a method of instructional design that was co-created with our learners, and something that Elsa spoke at the very beginning. It's just so important that that is consistent across all tutors on a program, so that norms are established and that those norms are underpinned by our values, and that's how we co-create an equitable culture where all students can engage. And I'm proud to say that, like, on a weekly basis, we've an average of about 88% engagement in our teaching and learning activities, which I feel is really good. So for us, it's all about empowering students, because for us, everybody has to be engaged in that community, and everybody has to feel responsible for co-creating that community. So I'll go on to the next slide, if that's okay. Next one, because that's just a repeat. So when I talk about our dialectical approach, I'm really talking about us creating a structure that invites students to engage and to take personal responsibility for their engagement. And then they become partners in shaping the context within which learning takes place. So we have class rep meetings with students, or with students every 3 weeks. Um, and if there's any changes that need to be made to the context, if there are any barriers, that takes place. And again, there is this consistency, and this is all fed out to tutors on the program. So not only at the end of term do we take this feedback from students, it happens every 3 weeks. Is that okay? Can we go on to the next slide? That's great. Yeah. Next one. Next one. So there will be a link up to my Prezi. Laura's going to put it up for you, and I just have our model of engagement there. So every week when students come on, there is a lecture. They then attend a live webinar or a workshop, and each week they have an educational action, which is something they have to do with what they have been taught. And then that invites them into a forum where they get feedback and feed forward on their performance. And that's all tied into what they need to do for the assessment. Um, the next slide here will show you how our VLE is set up. So if you want to access this on the Prezi link, which will be up for you, you'll be able to zoom into all of them. So we have our VLE set up in a very specific way. There's the lecture, then there's the link to the webinar. Then we have our educational action, where students have to do something with the information. They go into the forum, they post their responses, and they get feedback and feed forward. So students have to be there. They have to be there on that forum if they want to get into those conversations that are happening. And as I'm saying, we've something like 88% engagement, which is, I think is really good. Next slide, if that's okay. Next one. We also use a lot of flipping the classroom, and students get about a week to prepare for the next webinar. So what they have to do is they have to, you know, engage with maybe a newspaper article, but it's related to the topic that we're covering. And then they come all fired up to engage in debate with people, you know, who may have different perspectives. Like we were looking at the launching of the sex toolkit, or the toolkit for sex workers in a university in the UK, which was a controversial topic that linked into the human rights theme. Next slide. That's okay. Yeah, next one. So on the Prezi link, in case you're interested in, well, what do students have to say about our model of engagement? And if you click into all the pages there, students are openly talking about what it's like, to be engaged in a course that where the structures of engagement are co-created with them, where every week they engage in educational actions, they get feedback, this feeds out into their own WhatsApp group and they're all discussing it. So it creates a community, where students, they have to be there. You know, once they're taking part, they're in those conversations, and that's a really good thing. Okay, next slide. Yeah, next one. Yeah, so I suppose what we know and what we don't know. We have five, I suppose, patterns of engagement. We have, as I say, small percentage of students who are not engaging. We have group two that we call intermittent surface engagers. Group three, engagement waners. They're students who engage deeply at the beginning, but their engagement may wane, but they tend to come back in again at the end. We have consistent surface level engagers, and we've consistent deep engagers who learn from feedback. And the next slide. And of course, no surprise, the correlation between engagement and the outcomes that all students are after. I suppose for us, we're really starting to look at group one and two now. Our group one are the group we're likely to get essays from essay writing companies from, because the material won't be from our course at all. It could be very well presented. Group two are a group that we are finding, they're trying to engage, but there's barriers. So if you come on to the next slide, that's where we're at currently. We're just, our head of student support is going to be working really to uncover what we can do to support those learners who may currently be going outside our structures to get support, but we want to bring them in. We want to make that community a place where everybody can take part. And if we just go to the last slide there. So my take home message is, like, basically what we've started to do is to empower students to take part in teaching and learning activities. We're building structures that reward engagement. And what I would say, we're co-creating them with our students. We're really working to embed evidence-based student support, universal design for learning, but also, and this is something that we have come across quite a lot this semester, you know, trauma-informed approaches to education. And there were many students that, for me, you know, their stress was related to things, and implementing a trauma-informed approach really worked. And, you know, I just know from the feedback it has really worked. Students have made adjustments, and that's just something that I'd be promoting. If you link into my slides, there's some more details on how I got students to tell us about what their engagement was like. And my email is in at the end of my slides if you click on the Prezi link. Okay, thanks for your time. Lovely to be here.